Okay, welcome to our next lecture on network security. So last time we have had basically we repeated once again the layering setup in networking nowadays, so that we are still familiar with how the layerings are. So we have the physical layer and link layer. Typically they belong together because they are associated to a network card. Let's say one dedicated network card with some where you can plug in a twisted pair cable. This is the physical layer, the copper in the cable that is tightly linked to how the network card uses this opportunity. So typically this is one. Then we have the network layer with the addressing across the whole internet, so that we have unique addresses, IP version 4 and IP version 6 addresses in the, let me just see, in the network. And then, let me just see, one moment. Ah yeah, let's keep it there. So we have here some addressing, we have here the routing, then we have UDP and TCP that allow us to address processes, so that we have port numbers that allow us at the sender side to identify which application sent the message, and then messages passed on to the destination node, identified by the address in the network layer, so IP version 4 address. Then it arrives at the transport layer. Let's say then the message that was delivered from source A to source B is delivered to the network layer at source B. Source B verifies that it is the recipient. It checks, is it a UDP or TCP message? If it's TCP, then it is handed over the message to the TCP handler. If it's UDP, then there's a UDP handler. In UDP, let's say it is unpacked, and we look into the header information and check which port number is given, and that decides which application was addressed by this message, and then we pass it on to the correct application. Everything fine so far. Maybe we should have a little repetition on the addressing scheme in IP. As you see here, we have typically this 4 octets. So one of these numbers have 8 bits. So here in total IP version 4 we have 32 bits by 8 bits, 8 bits, 8 bits and 8 bits with numbers from 0 to 255. Typically the largest number is used for broadcasting, and we have also typically some kind of representation of this scheme. So if we have an IP address 192.168.0, 27/24. This /24 is the subnet mask. So this 24 means that the first 24 bits, that equals first 24 bits address the network. So this is the network address. Maybe some few words on this IP address, how it is composed. So we have the 32 bits. It's always 32 bits in IP version 4. And typically what we have is that one part of it is the subnet. So this is basically the ID, the address of the network. And the remaining bits, let's say in our case, in this case 24 bits address the subnet and 8 bits are for host addressing. This doesn't have to be related to the power of 2, so this 24. We can also have addresses, subnet addresses of, let's say, 30 bits or 29 bits. So we could also have an address such as 192.168. Let's take again 0, and then maybe 252/30, so that we have a 30 bits addressing or identifying the network, and we have 2 bits addressing the host, and the host can be 252, 253, 254, and 255. These are the potential 4 hosts that we can address with the 2 bits that we have. What we also often have is in any kind of such subnets, so meaning these 4 hosts, that the highest IP address is used for broadcasting in this network. So it's a very tiny network. And the router, which is basically the contact point here, so we can have 4 addresses, so let's say 4 potential addresses, but the router itself has also an address, and this is typically the lowest. So this is some kind of convention. It's not really enforced, but this is some kind of common practice that the smallest number of the available host addresses is to be used by the router, and the highest is for broadcasting. I just want to point this out, so how the addressing is, and otherwise you have quite some freedom how the IP addresses are assigned. Typically, the IP addresses are assigned, let's say a country gets a /6, maybe it's to say something for this 24-bit subnet. So if we have here 24 bits representing the subnet address, that can also be written in this form, 255, 255, 255, and 255 and 0. That means here we have the first 8 bits set to 1. So the first 24 bits are set to 1 and then to 0. Yeah. So let's make it this way. This 24 subnet mask equals that the first 24 bits are set to 1 and the rest is set to 0. And if you XOR this number with any kind of address, so let's say 192.168, 17 and 50, that means if this is XORed, only these numbers are passed through, and an XOR of any kind of bit with 0 equals in 0. So that means the resulting address is the network address. So this 24 notation equals this notation equals this notation. So this is all the same, basically telling how many bits are belonging to the subnet identification and how many are belonging to the host identification. We will use that later on when we talk also about firewalls, how to identify where messages are coming from, and so therefore this kind of revising and recall in the addressing scheme of IP version 4 is quite useful here. Okay, this is somewhere, I think we have stopped somewhere here the last time. So basically there are lots of protocols around. The important part is that we need to be aware that this kind of layering always exists. So here we have the data link MAC layer, we have the networking layer with IP mainly, we have TCP, UDP, and then the application layers, protocols. Because later on we will also use Wireshark, which allows us to have a look at individual packets, how they are built up, how they are created, how they are looking like, and then we will see the same pattern here as we have it here also in Wireshark, so in real packets. Okay. Yeah. In reality, I mean, these are just some sample protocols. If they will be relevant for our case, we will also have a look at them. Maybe one tool to highlight up front, because previously it was also not too known to many students, is the Telnet protocol, which is very simple. It basically allows you, so if you specify under Linux that you want to connect to a specific address. So this is the destination address that you want to connect to, and I think you also tell which port you want. So you also have to say which process you want to communicate to. Then it basically connects to it, and it allows you to manually type the commands that should be sent there. So it's like a debug tool where you can manually, for example, connect to a web server and send your manually typed HTTP requests. That allows us, that as we will see later, to debug the protocols in the application layer. Okay. Wireshark, we briefly talked about it. This is a very nice tool. We will also have a look at it. Let me just start it in the background so that I can show you how it looks like. So, what it does is, if you are connected to the internet, then obviously your computer supports, so this is basically here, so your computer supports these various layers, and what it does is it captures all of these packets and allows you to debug them. So we will use this tool to look into the messages that we are exchanging. Just to show you how it looks like. So here we have Wireshark opened, and I'm only currently in Wi-Fi. There's Ethernet 4, I'm not really sure what this is. Adapter for loopback traffic, this is for internal communication. But let's say I open this Wi-Fi network, and there are some packages coming in. So, and for example, if I open a website, just an example, there's a simple website, we opened it, and now I can have a look at how this message looked like. So there's ongoing traffic. This will not be of interest of us, but I just filter now for HTTP traffic, and we see there has been this call from my local source. So this is my local machine here. Destination is the IP address of let me just tune it a little bit. So my local machine contacted the web server on port 80 and sent this HTTP message. Here we have also the full packet with the HTTP request using TCP, using the IP protocol, using Ethernet, so the Wi-Fi card, and there are the Wi-Fi details. So we are able to look into each individual packet that has been sent out. So for example, here is my HTTP request. Here's the answer. So I got the HTTP OK text HTML. Here is the website that has been transferred. And there's also background image, and there's a favorite icon. So we can basically trace with this tool how messages in the network look like that we exchange. This will be a very handy debug tool that we use to see how the network protocols, the network security protocols are operating. Okay, so far for Wireshark. And let's talk a little bit about network security, what issues so why network security is relevant. Obviously, everything is quite widely connected. We have billions of machines connected to the internet, offering services. Internet of Things is ongoing, so we have more and more devices, sensors, we have computing units online, and there are some design properties of the internet that are not ideal. So basically, when the internet was created initially by some scientists in a few labs, they were basically family and friends of each other, and they had the focus on building the network so that they can communicate. So compatibility was in focus, and performance was in focus, but security was not really a design goal. And now years after the protocols being established, it is difficult in some parts to try to secure those in the second step. So basically it's all already deployed, all the protocols are outside, and now there are endeavors, I mean obviously since decades, to close potential security holes and to consider security in all layers nowadays. But because backward compatibility is so important, it's not so easy to do it from scratch. So the ideal case would be to come up with very new, very secure protocols and then to deploy it for everyone in the internet. But that kind of approach cannot happen. So you can only introduce patches, you can only change previous protocols, you have to have lots of parallel ongoing protocols, and once they're outdated are only used by a very small minority and there are sufficient alternatives, then you can switch to the newer ones and basically shut off the support for the unsecure ones. So let's think about how the bad guys can attack computer networks. Then we look at how we can, what kind of tools we have to protect ourselves against those bad guys, and how the network architects should build better networks. So what are the security goals? What is the important elements to basically maintain and to secure? And first of all, there's authentication. So if you start to communicate with someone, you need to verify whom you are communicating with. Obviously, this is one of the most essential, or the most essential step in the whole process. So you need to be sure, and it must be verified whom you are communicating to. For example, in cellular networks, you have a SIM card which verifies who you are. You verify with entering your PIN that you are the person owning that SIM card. The SIM card has its own verification mechanisms. But the internet itself, everybody can claim to be anyone. Obviously, if you are just somehow connected to the internet, you get the IP address, and who's behind that IP address, there's no information on that. Everybody can lie. Then the next point, confidentiality. Once you know whom you want to talk to, that data can only be read by authorized subjects. So basically, that means that the data that you spread could be passing over several multiple hops in the networking process, such as in routing, that you have anyway multi-hop communication, but only the authorized subject should be able to read it. We will see how this can be done. And in addition, we also need data integrity, or integrity in short. That means that the data, if it is changed, unauthorized changes must be detected. That means that obviously data is a bunch of bits and anyone could change the bits. But if there has been some unauthorized change, it should be noticeable that somebody changed the bits. So you cannot enforce the bits to stay intact, and so integrity is not about disallowing somebody to change the bits. It's about allowing or enforcing that malicious or unauthorized changes are detected. Okay, we will also see how this is done. And then there are some further elements such as access restrictions, so something limiting the access to different parts of the network based on authentication, based on source information. But basically we will also, these three elements is typically called CIA, so confidentiality, integrity, authentication, but authentication being the basis for the other two. These are typically the important elements that we focus on. Also what we have, I just noticed that it's not on the slide, is availability, because a little bit it's of a different kind of security goal. Availability means that a service is that no unauthorized subject can interrupt the service. So basically that the service is provided and is accessible, but authorized elements can stop it. So availability is having a services available online. Okay, and then let's see how we typically address potential challenges. Typically there are some people involved, Alice, Bob, and Trudy, or Charlie. So the attacker has different names, but typically Alice and Bob want to communicate through the network, and the network is some kind of black box. Everything can happen there. Also in the internet, just to give you an example, we just had it. I had it 1 hour ago in Kone, in communication networks. If we, for example, look at who is accessing, so through how many hops is my communication going, at least when I'm opening my website, and we measure the delay to these nodes. In a simple case, maybe we go over 10 hops. In more complex cases, we might go over 20 hops. And every of these routers on the way potentially could read our messages, could potentially modify our messages, could potentially also send in our own name messages out. So in this case, just to a local German web server, we need 13 hops. And if going further international, then there are 20, 25 hops involved. So there's lots of potential interaction in the black box of the network. So what can the attackers do? They can intercept messages and read them. That's typically called sniffing. Any router that the message is passing through is receiving the message, can analyze it. But also if there's some kind of, let's say, shared medium. So for example, if we have some Wi-Fi ongoing, so if this would be a Wi-Fi network, everybody in the communication range is able to read and perceive what has been transferred. I also have some bachelor thesis now ongoing where the goal is to explicitly find out how much of the data is we can basically read correctly. Sometimes, especially in this Wi-Fi sharing scenarios, it's also a desired property that sometimes we are looking into. So for example, if the router wants to transfer data first to A and then to B, the exact data, then sometimes it would be beneficial if B could, just by listening to what is communicated to A, already complete most of its data reception, basically. So sometimes it's also a good case, but mostly it's an undesired case when some malicious node tries to read data that is not addressed to them. Okay. We will see what kind of data can be read. Spoofing is the next one. This is basically not just reading, but basically pretending to be someone else. So if the attacker C would create a message, but claiming it came from B, and could try to cause some undesired actions by A. So spoofing is a very common attack. This is because this kind of source information, who was sending the packet, it is exactly as on the letter. You can write anything as you want. So this was previously, especially for letters, I've heard some common trick to get your message delivered anywhere for free. So you just wrote the destination address as source address and put not enough stamps on the letter, and then it was sent back to the sender, which was actually the destination. So I think this is not working anymore, but especially in IP networks, and due to the history of how the IP networks was created, it can be easily added any kind of information for the source. Obviously also for the destination, because that's something that you freely select, but especially for the source. So the source information is just as the letters on the characters on the letter that you wrote. It's not really reliable. There's no verification in it. Yeah, obviously, both can be also combined. So if the malicious node sniffs some packets, so there's some eavesdropping, so you listen to the traffic that is coming, and let's say the attacker would create a history of messages that it received, message 1, message 2, message 3, and so on. So it keeps a log of these messages. Then there's also the replay attack, when it picks one of these messages from its log and sends it again. So if you would have a very simple log, a very simple protocol that basically assumes that, what problem can occur when you have a replay attack? So let's say A is a client and B is the bank, and A wants to send a wire transfer. I don't know. It's maybe due to some real reason it has to send C €1 or so. And this specific message that is maybe also signed by A, and this is very verified, this message is really coming from A, sent €1, is perceived and captured by the attacker. Now the attacker can continuously play that packet to the bank B, and the bank B should then every time send €1 to the attacker C, because it's verified by A and it's really coming from A. It's signed by A. So this is a replay attack that could be also done. Obviously not just, So basically there's no protection in general for packets in the network. So neither the sender information, destination information, any content can be changed, and with that harm can be caused. So we need some kind of countermeasures how to protect the data. So the integrity of the data, the confidentiality of the data, and the authenticity of the data. Then again, pointing to availability, what we also have is, let's say every communication is proper and there's no attacks on the confidentiality and so on, but we want to attack the availability of a service. So what can they do? So they what the attackers can do is to first identify a target, and if they have a large group of, let's say, hosts under their control, such as a botnet that's typically caused by a malware. So malware spreads through machines, and every machine that is has been infected is now part of the botnet. And now let's say a malicious, an attacker has 10,000, 100,000 machines under its control, and then it can simply ask those machines to send messages to the target. And the resources of the target are obviously limited. It can only support 65,000 ports, so processes opened individually. It has a specific bandwidth, and if in total the sending parties overload this resources, these capacities, then no legitimate, so if this would be a legitimate client and it would state a query, then the target would not have sufficient resources to answer. So there are many options how attacks can be implemented, mostly because the network, how it grew, did not take that into account. There was no confirmation of authenticity. So who is actually a sender, a receiver? There's no verification in the original internet. There's no verification of who's the sender of packets. there's no confidentiality or integrity of packets. So therefore we have to look at the network protocols, the secure network protocols that introduce the security of this kind. So far for the networking background. Let's have a look at some crypto essentials, because what we mostly can do is, so what tools do we have at hand to protect the network? There are one large category, let's say 70% of the solutions stem from cryptography. Basically, this is the toolbox that we have to know in order to be able to build out of these tools some useful countermeasures. And the other, let's say 30%, is about proper filtering and logging. Okay, so as the last time I asked, how many of you had some background in cryptography? I think you two, and then anyone else, cryptography? So RSA or yes? No. Okay. Okay, so therefore I thought we make a quick. So we talk about it so that you get the core elements of it. So let's see what tools do we have at hand that we can use and that are used everywhere in the secure networking protocols. So let's have a look. Again, the same setup. So again, here the network is some kind of black box. So Alice and Bob don't know what is happening in the network once the packet left their device. So anything can happen there. Trudy can intercept, delete, add messages. So there's no guarantee. So what you need is some kind of tools, let's say. So what do we need? So what is cryptography? What do we need? So first of all, some terms. Everything that is unencrypted is that's plain text. That's the original data, basically. And what we need is some kind of encryption algorithm, decryption algorithm. And what is that? That encryption algorithm takes the plain text, it applies somehow a key to it, Alice encryption key, and then out comes the ciphertext. Something that cannot be read only by Bob. Bob can apply to the ciphertext his key and the specific decryption algorithm, and out comes the same plain text as Alice has sent. So first, that's the first step. So the question will be, what kind of algorithms do we have? What kind of application of keys do we have? Just for some writing, we denote that basically if we apply the key of Alice to the ciphertext, then we get basically the ciphertext, and if we decrypt an encrypted message, then we get the message out. Okay. So far, so good. So the question is, what approaches do exist? And basically, there are two big categories. One is the symmetric key cryptography, where the main point is they use the same key. The algorithms might differ a little bit, but they are not secret. So the algorithms are typically publicly known, and the only thing that should keep the data protected is the key. So basically, the quality of the key will decide on the quality of on the secrecy of the data. It's not through obscurity that the encryption algorithm or decryption algorithm is somehow hidden or secret. So they should be public, and everybody should be able to look for bugs in it. and the quality of the key will basically determine how easy it is to decipher the text. So the big point is that the key is equal on Alice's side and on Bob's side. Later on we will talk about how they exchange that key, but let's assume they have the same key. So there are some very simple and very old symmetric approaches that are still used today, so that we can look into. So what are there are three generic approaches how to encrypt data symmetrically. So first, about permutation. So if you have a set of input data, let's say like this, you reorder the position. Or if we talk about symbols, if we have a letter A, B, C, and D, and so on, if we shift this by a bit, so let's say if we shift every input A to a C by 2 steps, that would be, for example, the Caesar shifter. So Caesar, Julius Caesar, you know, famous Roman, he was Caesar. What was he? What was his role? Emperor, yes. And previously, I don't know. So he, a very important guy. So basically, he also used a ciphertext, and the simplest cipher is to just shift all letters in the alphabet by n positions. So basically, so if we have as a plain text Bingen, and we shift it by 2, then out of B becomes D, I becomes, no, not J, should be K, or? So, out of I becomes K, then N, P, G becomes I, and E becomes G. And N we have had again. So basically you just shift in the alphabet the letters by 2. If the key is 2. But the key can be between 0 and 26. So we have 0 to 26 potential keys that can be used. It's not so secure, admittedly, because you can't, in the worst case, test every key and then you find out which text makes the most sense. But this is one of the first symmetric encryption methods. Some slight extension is by the Vigenère shifter, that basically, because they noticed, okay, the keys are too short, so why don't we introduce a second keyword, such as here, baby, and basically you identify every letter in the keyword as a rule how to shift. So in this case, A is representing the first letter, that's somehow 0 in this case, because otherwise you cannot represent 0. B is a 1, and Y is -2. Okay, because Z is -1 and Y is -2. So now we basically apply this rule to the word Bingen, and to the first letter it's +1, to the second it's 0, to the next letter it's 1, then -2, and then again 1, 0, 1, -2, and so on. So basically you repeat the keyword to every letter of your plain text, and then you get first B plus 1 is C, I plus 0 is I again, Bingen N plus 1 is O, so C, O, E, and then F, N. This is the Vigenère shifter. That's more generic than Caesar. Caesar is only from one letter. Vigenère allows you to add a keyword that is then using basically character-wise the Caesar approach. But in more general, what can be said, this is some kind of permutation. So basically you have an input range, input alphabet, and you have the same input alphabet, but you rearranged. So basically, if this would be our input alphabet 1 to 8, and we rearrange it, this is the permutation. So with Caesar, that's very simple, 1, 2, 3, up to 26. And it is, if our key is 2, then it is like this, yeah, and so on. And with Vigenère, it's character-wise, but it's still permutation. So this is option number 1 for symmetric encryption. Basically, you have an input, you apply some kind of permutation on it, and at least you scrambled the output. Here's another example for the Vigenère with different keys. Let's say this is the cipher, try QVU, and then if we apply this key, HCUMGG, then London is the output. If we apply this key, then Bingen is the output. So basically, if we apply this approach, so we also always have to count modulus 26, so that we stay in the realm of letters, characters. But the approach that I presented before. Maybe at this point also to highlight what perfect security is. So as you see, the cipher doesn't tell anything about the potential plain text. If we use this key, London comes out. If we use that key, Bingen comes out. So every outcome is equally probable, just depending on the key. And if you don't have any further clues of what the plain text might be, if every outcome is really exactly equally probable, then it's called perfect security. Especially if you cannot accumulate additional knowledge that allows you to make some hints whether London or Bingen is more probable. Let's have another example for permutation. It's, for example, if we write the text in this format and read it in this direction, or if you just arrange, I mean, it's just a rearranging of the existing elements. One specific thing that you should note is that if we rearrange, we have the same patterns. So let's say we would encode this kind of, if we would encode always the same data, then with Caesar, we get probably also the same pattern, so they are equal. And also with Vigenère, so if this is long enough, we would see repeating patterns. And then we could predict something about the future. So it's not so good. And especially if we talk about bits, and let's say we arrange this set of bits, and previously we had one single bit and 3 zeros, then also after any kind of rearrangement, we will have one and 3 zeros. So permutation, rearranging, is limited. It's one way, but it's limited. Therefore, there are other elements to add to symmetrical encryption. The second step, what is typically also used, are substitution boxes. A substitution is where you have a clear mapping of let's say in this cases where basically you have a mapping table, let's say. So for example, if you had previously, this is your bit range, I mean your bit pattern, your plain text, and depending on some input on the key maybe, it is mapped to this 111. If that would have been your input and the key or some other parameter would use that, I don't know, maybe I don't know, maybe this. So So especially what you should note is here we had just one one, and here we have 4 ones. So now we break the rule of reoccurring patterns. So it's really a mapping table. If this was the input, then we look it up in the table, and maybe the output is, I don't know, this. It's really, these are handmade, this is just random. The important part is, if you have, in this case, 16 inputs, you map it to 16 equal outputs, and it should be reversible. So if you know which key was used, then you can also reverse it. So if you know that this is the ciphertext, the 4 ones, and you know that this key 00 has been used, then the input was the 0101. So it's basically some kind of mapping technique based on your key. Okay. And then there's a third option. So we had permutation, we have substitution, and the last one is an XOR. Very simple, where you have a cipher equals your plain text XOR a key, which should be equal long. And one nice property that you have, that is also reversible. So as you see in the every step in the symmetric approach is reversible. Permutation is reversible if you know the key. That means by how many steps have been shifted or how you have to read it. The substitution box is reversible if you know which mapping has taken place. And the XOR is also reversible if you have the key. So if you have the key and the cipher, then you can reverse it. The key in the mapping is basically describing which mapping function to use, and the key in the permutation is how you reordered the data of the plain text. So every time you have the key and you have the cipher, you can reverse the computation and you get the plain text out. And these 3 methods are mainly the most used variants. The only thing that the advanced symmetric methods use, as you see here, ideally the key must be exactly as long as the message. So therefore, what is typically done, if this is your message, it is typically split in, let's say, 64 bits, and the key is also 64 bits long, so that you have equally long keys and inputs. And then you apply it first to this part, then you get C1, and then you apply it to the second part, and you get C2. So basically you create, M1 and M2, so you create blocks to which you apply it, the key. And sometimes, yeah, I will talk shortly about it. And that's basically it. So one of the prominent symmetric encryption keys, DES, from 93, it has it is also using blocks, no problem. And what it does is it repeatedly applies this kind of computations. A more advanced one, this is the IIS, Advanced Encryption Scheme from 2001, still secure today, has 128 block length. And what you see here in red and in blue and so on is really applying such patterns, substitution, permutation, XOR, using the key as an input. Then you see this kind of bits has to go in there, and not just is it done once, but it is sometimes done over 20 rounds. And there's so much confusion, so much computation done, that basically the data is so distorted that only with the key you can restore it and recompute everything how it was in the beginning. So basically with the round keys. I think here I showed, let me just see. Ah yes, this. So basically you take the key, you take the plain text part block, and then you apply many of these combinations of permutations, of substitutions, of XOR, and then you get as an output the cipher, and sometimes the cipher is also XORed with the main with the plain text, and that is then encrypted. And then this is again XORed with the plain text. So, but there's no further magic involved. So it's really just very long and complicated permutations, substitutions, XORs. And if you know the key, you can revert this computation. If you don't know it, then you cannot. So, how to exchange the key? So as we have seen, it is important that Alice and Bob have the key. So maybe once again, why do we use this? So this will provide us a tool that we can make sure that if Alice sends a message to Bob, only Bob can read this message. Yeah, because it's then encrypted, and if Bob has the same key, then Bob can read it and the attacker cannot. So how can we exchange the key? This is the main challenge, because what we have here is that we cannot, we just assume that the data, that the key is present at both sides. But this is, yeah, how to do it? So we cannot call Bob and tell him the key, so it has to be some other way. And there has been some very nice proposal by two researchers, Graffi and Kalman. And the idea is the following. So first, what we need to know is if we operate in a mod space, or how to call it. So let's say if we have yeah. So if we are in the domain of I don't know, is it a German symbol? So basically we have the number, so the full numbers, and we use something like a mod. So that equals the numbers. So if we are in some kind of mod environment where we compute every number mod p, then the potential elements of that number set is 0 to p minus 1. Is it right? So just give you an example. Let's say we are, I don't know, x mod 6, and the potential numbers that that we can have is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah. I hope that, are you all aware of this, how this works with modulo? Yeah. Okay, that's already great. So, and then we can have a look at whether there are some generators for these set. So generator G of a number set mod P, for example. I mean, let's say mod P. In this case, let's say this is 6, and we need a number that is prime to 6. That means, for example, 5 would have no common divider with P. So that means if we iterate through the potential elements generated by G, that would be G to the power of 1 and G to the power of 2, G to the power of no, not to the power, sorry. It's 2G and 3G and 4G and so on. Can they create this set? And this is the case if G doesn't have common factors with P. So for example, if G is 5, then the first element is 5, mod 6. Then the next element, if we add 5 to 5, then we are at 9. Mod 6 is, no, then we are at 10. So basically it's this. Yeah, if we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 elements further. Is it right? 5 plus 5 is 10. Mod. Huh? Yeah, mod 6. 10 mod 6 is 4, yes. And then also from here we go 5 elements further, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then we have 3 and 2 and and 1 and 0. So 5 is an element that if we multiply it sufficient times in the mod P world, so mod 6 in our case, we generate each individual element. Yeah? We could have also taken 17 or so, because that also don't have common factors with 6. Or if P would be 20, then we can take 3 because it has different factors. So 20 has 2 and 5 as basic factors, and 3 is not overlapping, so that would also generate the full set. So let's say why this is useful. It is useful because Diffie and Kalman basically came up with the following idea, that they are also looking at this kind of domain, and the P is in this case also mod P, and G is the generator of it, so it has the same properties. It has no common factors with P, and every element in the set mod P is generated if we multiply G often enough. So what do we have now? Basically Alice is defining these two numbers, but they can be also somehow standardized, doesn't have to be very specific. And this is the secret of A, and this is the secret of B. And what they want to achieve is they want to exchange a common knowledge, a common key, without anyone who is listening to their communication being able to recreate the same secret. So what is A doing? First, A sends G and P and this term, so G to the power of A, mod P. And this let this be big A, or capitalized A. So this will become public, and of course this will also become public. And now B computes its own part, so it takes G and applies its secret to it, and we get capitalized B. And this is also exchanged. So, but what they do now is A, or Bob, takes this A, and this was G to the power of A, and computes basically G to the power of A times B, mod P. And A does the following. This was G to the power of B, and that's G, B, A. And that's the same. So so Alice and Bob computed the same key, the same value, the same number at both sides. That's good. So we have on both sides a secret, but from the public data that has been transferred, so has basically been transferred G and P, that's fine, and there's been G to the power of A and G to the power of B. And there's no way how this can be resulting in the same. So if you multiply it, then basically you get G to the A plus B. So this is not the same. And if you take this to the power of GB, that's even G to the A times GB. That's also something else. So you cannot combine only from the public information that was transferred what their common secret is. That's already good. Okay, so far for the symmetric cryptography, we are currently stuck at this moment. So it's not yet sufficient to make use of it too strongly in the secure protocols. But one very nice property of these symmetric cryptography is that it's very fast. So you can really encrypt very quickly with this approach. But still, one element is missing that we are uncovering now. And therefore, so one of the drawbacks is still that can I help you? Is there everything okay? Okay. So one of the problems is still that Alice and Bob have individually to exchange a key. So every two communication party needs to exchange some information, and in this place, at this point, do we really know whether this was Bob that we received the message from? Because what can also happen is that Alice exchanges a key with Bob, maybe, and that person exchanges a key with Bob. So if this is Charlie or some attacker, then we could encrypt this kind of, so we could exchange securely the messages here, encrypted, and Charlie could encrypt messages there, but there's no verification of who the person is. So still there's some limitations, so we need something more. And the something more comes in the form of asymmetric cryptography. So, is it the same? One moment. No. So we come now to the public key cryptography. Basically, the idea here is that you don't need individual keys anymore between two parties, but you have one public key for yourself. Yeah. So basically, there's a public key and there's a private key. And everybody who has the public key, which is public, of Bob, let's say, can send an encrypted message to Bob. And only Bob, who has his private key, which is private, can decrypt that message. So that means you have a part of keys that can be shared everywhere. Everybody can have it, no problem. But everybody who has that key can use it to securely communicate with Bob. And the trick is that basically this private and the public key, they cancel each other out. And obviously if you hand out one key, the public one, everybody can use it, and then you get this kind of, this is some ciphertext, but only you can cancel out this encryption. And that sounds good. So basically that was really a new way, because then you don't need between any two parties a dedicated individual key. It is sufficient that you have just one public key and everybody can communicate with you. Let's have a look how this works. So we need really some kind of property. So let's say this plus is the public key of Bob and the minus is the private key, and they need to cancel each other out. Yeah. And obviously, if you have the public key, it should not be possible to compute the private key out of it. Okay, so let's have a quick look at how this is working. So this is the RSA algorithm from Rivers, Shami, and Adelson. And one of the properties that we need to keep therefore in mind, again, we are in mod space. If we are having such a computation, a plus b mod n, then this mod n, basically you can sprinkle it everywhere like sugar on a cake. You can put mod n here, you can put mod n there, you can, basically this mod n applies everywhere. So here an example, x mod n to the power of 2, so that would be 14 mod 10 to the power of 2 equals, so then again mod n, mod 10. So you can put it everywhere. That's basically 4 to the power 2, or it's identical to first calculating it. So if you would skip that, 14 to the power of 2 is 169, mod 10 is also 6. So it's always the same. You can sprinkle this mod everywhere. That's one key observation. Okay, the next point. So what is the idea with RSA? So the idea with RSA is that basically any message is a set of bits, and every bit can be represented by an integer number. So obviously you have, if any kind of bits, that represents some number. So if this is m, then this is a number. And in RSA, they are calculating with numbers. So basically, that's what's the message. So you don't have to look whether it's characters or strings or whatever. Eventually, it's a set of bits, and the set of bits are numbers. So let's see how this works. So RSA starts with two large prime numbers, 1024 bits each. So we have two prime numbers, p and q, and we first compute the n equals p times q. That's achievable. Then we calculate z by p minus 1 multiplied by q minus 1. A little bit strange why we need this, but let's do it. Okay. And then we select e smaller n so that it has no common factors with z. So it has no common factors with this. And let's take an example. Let's take p equals 3 and q equals 7. Yeah. Then this is 21. And z is 2 times 6 equals 12. So one element we could take would be 5, because 5 has no common factors with 12. And now we have to select the d in a way that basically ed mod z equals 1. So we need to compute something, what was it, 12 equals 1. That means 5 times something mod 12 equals 1, mod 12 equals 1. In this case, probably, what is it, then we have 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. That's also not ideal, because we have e and d then equal. Let me just see. Then 35. It's always the nice thing when you do a spontaneous example. So d would in this case be 5, but this is not a proper way. So that would work out, but we don't really want. Oh, is that right? Yeah, but we don't really want to have p them equally and e equaling d. Let me just see. Yes. Yeah. Let's take another example. 5 and 7. That would be better. Here. So not to take this, not to take 3. Let's take 5. 5 and 7, that's 35. So that's 35. Then z would be 4 times 6, that's 24. Then we take e equals can we take e equals 5? Let me just see, what do we take later? Yeah, let's take e equals 5. Yeah, up to now it's fine. And now we have to identify a value no, one moment. Oh, yeah, okay. So we have to find a d which mod multiplied with 5 and mod 24 is equals 1. There are some ways to do it. In the exams is typically much easier, but in this case it's easy to compute, if you have the slides later on, that d is 29. But there's one trick. So basically this z, this is a very interesting property, because we also select ed in a way that it's exactly divisible by z. So basically that e times d mod z equals 1. And why is that selected that way? Basically because we will use this property, and this only works if n and z have these properties. And let's see where we will use this. So basically we have, this would be our public key. So the n, this is p times q, and the e that we selected, and this is the private key that we have. And in order to encrypt the message, we take the message and to the power of e mod n, that's the cipher, and to decrypt it we use the cipher to the power of d. And now the magic happens. So if we insert the c, which was this here, to the power of d, what comes out is that this will result in m to the power of e d, and because there's just some magic, some mathematical function that it will be here mod z. This is there's some kind of mathematical lemma, some kind of theorem that tells you if you have this kind of property that you are mod n and you are computing basically this to the power of that, and it will allow you to compute mod z. And this has been selected in a way that this equals 1. And this is how the cancellation works. So let's have an example for this. So this is the example that we had previously. P equals 5 and Q equals 7. Then N equals 35 and Z equals 24. E is 5 and D equals 29. So basically this is what you select, and then this is what has to be computed. And if we multiply this, this is then 125 mod 24, is it right? It doesn't look correct. Can someone verify this? Ah, sorry. 145 divided by 24. So yeah, that's correct. Okay, so basically, and if you have to encrypt something, this is our plain text. This is our, so there's a 1. This means, let's say m equals 12. This is m to the power of e, and mod n. So the mod 35 is 17. And if we take the 17 to the power of d, then this will be the number, and mod n is again the 12 that we had. So basically the trick comes in this specific form, that m to the power of e to the power of d can be also written as m to the power of ed mod z mod n. And because this has been selected in specific ways that it exactly equals 1, e and d cancel each other out. And what you also see is the order of whether we encrypted the message first and then decrypted, or whether we decrypted it first and then encrypted, doesn't play a role. So we can basically hand out our public keys. Everybody can encrypt the message for us, and we can then decrypt it. But also the other way around, we can decrypt the message. That means we create a specific representation of the message, hand it out, and everybody with our public key can verify that it's from us. This is basically the big trick here. That you just have to believe me. This is the mathematic rule that is applied there. That in case n and z have that specific property, this can be used. And this is where it's used. Basically, this property is exactly used here. Otherwise, it would be a very huge number, but because we can apply it, then we get 1, and that will allow us to cancel basically the decryption and encryption out. And one other nice property is that if we use the public key first, somebody encrypts the message for us, and we decrypt it, that equals in the plain text, as well as if we would first apply our private key, and then anybody who has our public key can verify that, can basically get the message out. Yeah, so there's no order. The result is the same. And just now, why is this useful? So let's assume you hand out your public key. Everybody can encrypt messages for you, and you can read it. But why is this useful? This is useful because there you can put in some identity verifying information. So for example, I am Bob information. And everybody can basically check whether they can get the results out with the public key of Bob. So basically, only the person who had the private key can create this message. And this can relate to the identity of the person. Yes. So this will be then used for encryption. And this will be used for signatures, because only the one with the private key could create it. Yeah, maybe let's talk a little bit about how this public key should be handed out, what should be written there. So let's say there are these public keys, and this is just a number. Yeah, the public key is just a number. So it's actually it's the encryption part and this modulo part, 2 numbers. Okay. What we need next is to somehow assign this to the individuals. So let's assume you could really verify this public key belongs to Bob. Then you would solve the authentication problem. If you know this is really belonging to Bob, then you can send anytime messages to Bob in an encrypted format using this encryption, and then confidentiality would be done, authentication would be done. So how do you deal in real life if you don't know who somebody is? So if you tell me your name, how can I verify that your name is correct? What would be method of verification that we use nowadays in real life? Yes? Personal ID, yes. And would you do the same? Would I be able to identify you by your personal ID? I hope so. I mean, it's either passport, personal ID, yes. And why do we believe that the passport is a passport that you have, or identification card is correct?
Certified by government.
Yes, certified by government. So we need some kind of certificates, basically, that tells this is guy Bob, this is the public key, he verified to me that that's his public key, he could decrypt something I sent him in an encrypted format. I, the authority, certification authority XY, confirm that this person, Bob, is associated to this public key. So what is its certificate? Typically it has, what information do you need? You need some kind of subject name. That's typically the name Bob, or often it's the domain of websites or so, because that is somehow the identity, but it can be also persons. It's really the subject. What you also need is the public key of the subject. So these two things you want to merge. This is what you want to bind together. This is on your passport. There's a name and a picture, I think. That's typically. In this case, it will be the name and the public key of the subject. What else do we need in certificate? What else is on your passport? Can I create a passport? Why not? So what is else on it? Yes, the issuer. Exactly. Yeah. What is also there is typically, if there are too many people with the same name, there you have some kind of number. So the, how's it called? The certificate ID. That's typically a number, the unique number that is consecutively increasing or so. Then you have, what else do you have in your passport? Yeah, very good. Validity. Validity. Period, yes. And a signature. Issuer. So somehow verifying that the issuer really created this document. And that's almost it. So basically you need some authority, certification authority where you walk into, or somehow verify that your name is associated to the subject, to this public key. What this authority typically does in this dimensions is it sends you a message encrypted with your public key. So it sends you with your public key, with Bob's public key, a message, and then you have to send back m+1 or so. So you have to modify it. So you have to verify that you can encrypt it. By this, you can verify that you have the private key to it. You don't have to show your private key. You just verify that you have it and that you can use it. And by this, you are verified as Bob. And then the issuer is saying who is. Typically, it's in this case a certification authority, a company that does this service. It has a certificate ID, so number, validity period, maybe until next year, and the signature of the issuer. So that means it uses its private key of the issuer, certificate authority, to verify document. So basically it encrypts, so it decrypts the document so that everybody who has the public key of the issuer can verify basically this document, this CA doc, and out comes the document basically. So everybody who believes that this certificate authority is really the authority can verify that this certificate is correct. Maybe one very short point to finish up this topic is, let's assume this is a very huge document. Typically what you put in is so every time you encrypt the message, the ciphertext is equally large. And in this kind of cases, if you want to sign a document, we don't really want to have the signature being this big. Yeah? So you want to have a representation, some kind of short way to represent the document without actually using the document. And here's where the hash functions come into play. Do you know hash functions? So what they do, they take from a set of independent size, so let's say 2 to the power of star, and map it to a fixed size set. And this is easy to compute, but the back, so you cannot compute back. So basically, if you have a hash, you cannot reconstruct where it came from. But the nice thing is, if you have a very big document and you hash it, you get always 160 bits. And for example, if the signature is so large and you hash it, you get the hash of the document, that's just 160 bits. And if you basically sign as a certificate authority with your private key only the hash, and you further deliver the document, then everybody can recalculate. So this is what you sent. Everybody can recalculate the hash. Everybody can verify with your public key what you sent. So we have to make it this way. And out comes what you signed, this hash you signed, and if it's exactly the same, then it has been verified that basically you verified, you signed the documents, you signed a representation of it, and it's equally valid. So these are the steps that we basically need as building blocks for security that we will use in the following lectures. Symmetric encryption, asymmetric encryption, and signatures as well as certificates. During the course we will also go a little bit more in detail in this, but these are the building blocks that will occur everywhere. And I'm happy that we have covered it. So next time we'll more dig into real networking protocols. I would say have a nice day. Maybe one info, next week I'm not here, so the lecture will be online. And also there are no lab dates scheduled, but we will manage it. So you will find the next lecture next Monday online. Okay. Have a nice day and see you then next time.